I was standing in the middle of a deserted logging road, staring at my wife's dead SUV, when the mechanic leaned over and whispered, "Sir, there's absolutely nothing wrong with this battery. In fact, someone manually disconnected the terminal." My heart didn't just sink, it felt like it had been physically ripped out of my chest and dropped into the mud at my feet. I looked at the dark woods surrounding us, the same spot where my wife had supposedly been stranded 3 times in the last month, and I realized I wasn't standing at the site of a mechanical failure. I was standing at the site of a crime scene, the murder of my marriage. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why that rainy Tuesday evening destroyed every single thing I believed in, I need to take you back to where the cracks first started to show. From the outside, Sarah and I were the couple people used as a benchmark. We'd been married for 8 years, lived in a beautiful cedar-planked home in the suburbs of Portland, and still went on date nights every Friday without fail. I'm a structural engineer. I build things to last, things that can withstand pressure, and I thought I'd built our life the same way. Sarah was an interior designer, the kind of person who could walk into a cold, empty room and make it feel like a sanctuary. We had this routine every morning. I'd make the espresso, she'd toast the bagels, and we'd do the crossword puzzle together. We had a dog, a golden retriever named Cooper, who worshipped the ground she walked on. Our friends joked that if we ever broke up, they'd lose their faith in love entirely. That should have been my first warning. When something looks that perfect, you stop looking for the flaws. But looking back, the first real crack appeared about 4 months ago. Sarah started taking on high-end clients who lived out in the coastal range, wealthy tech types who wanted secluded cabins turned into luxury retreats. That was her explanation anyway. She started coming home late, smelling like pine needles and expensive cologne, claiming the mountain air was addictive. She'd be exhausted, barely able to keep her eyes open during our Friday dinners at Marco's, our favorite Italian spot. She'd blame the long drives and the dead zones where her GPS and phone would cut out for hours at a time. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was Sarah. She was my home. But what came next was so much worse than a few late nights. It started with the alternator. That's what she called it the first time she called me from a landline at a gas station 2 towns over. She said the car had just died on Blackwood Ridge, a notoriously remote stretch of road about 45 minutes from our house. There's no cell service up there, just miles of towering Douglas firs and old logging trails. I went and picked her up, had the car towed, and the next day the shop said they couldn't find a thing wrong. Must have been a fluke, she said, leaning over to kiss my cheek, just a glitch in the sensors. 2 weeks later it happened again, same spot, Blackwood Ridge. She told me she'd been sitting there for 2 hours in the dark before a kind stranger gave her a lift to the nearest phone. She looked shaken, her hands trembling as she held her tea. I felt this fierce protective rage on her behalf. I hated that she was out there alone, vulnerable. But if that was all I found, maybe I could have let it go. Maybe I would have just traded her car in for a newer model and moved on. But then I checked the mileage.
I'm an engineer. Numbers are my language. When I got the car back from the second breakdown, I noticed the trip odometer. Blackwood Ridge is exactly 22 miles from her last known client's office, but the car had put on nearly 80 miles since she left that morning. I did the math in my head 3 times, hoping I was wrong. I wasn't. She hadn't just been sitting there for 2 hours. She'd been somewhere else. And that's when I realized this wasn't just a car issue. I didn't confront her, not yet. I needed to know why she was lying about being stranded in a place where no one could reach her. I went into the glove box one night while she was in the shower, looking for the registration, and I found a small black plastic device tucked behind the manual. I'm tech-savvy enough to know what a signal jammer looks like. It's a device that blocks cellular and GPS signals in a small radius. My wife, the woman who complained about dead zones, was carrying a device designed to create them. My stomach turned. She wasn't losing service. She was killing it on purpose so I couldn't track her phone. I felt like I was moving through a dream or a nightmare. I spent the next week watching her, my eyes open for the first time in years. I noticed the way she shielded her phone screen when a notification popped up. I noticed the second set of keys in her purse that didn't belong to our house or her office. I knew I had to be patient. I had to see the full picture, even if the view was going to kill me. The third breakdown happened on a Tuesday. I was at work when she texted me. Heading up to the ridge for the final walkthrough. Phone might die. See you at 7. I didn't text back. I already had my plan in motion. I had installed a secondary hardwired GPS tracker deep inside the wheel well of her SUV 3 days prior, one that didn't rely on the car's internal systems and was shielded against low-frequency jammers. I pulled up the app on my phone and watched the little blue dot. She didn't go to the client's house. She drove straight to Blackwood Ridge, but instead of stopping on the shoulder, she turned off onto a private gated gravel road that led to a refurbished hunter's lodge. I knew that lodge. It was owned by Julian Vane, the lead architect at her firm, the man who had given her the promotion. I spent the next 3 hours acting completely normal to anyone who saw me. I finished my reports. I spoke to my colleagues. I even stopped and bought a bottle of wine on the way home. But I didn't go home. I drove my old work truck, the one she never drives and wouldn't recognize in the dark, up to the ridge. I parked half a mile down the road and hiked through the brush, the rain soaking through my jacket, until I had a clear view of the lodge. There was her SUV, parked right next to Julian's silver Porsche. The lights in the lodge were low, amber and warm against the cold blue of the forest. I sat there in the mud for an hour, my breath hitching in my chest, watching the shadows move behind the curtains. I saw them. I saw her laugh, that specific, head-back laugh she usually reserved for our anniversary dinners. I saw him put his hand on the small of her back. The physical pain was so intense I thought I might actually vomit. But I didn't. I waited. I watched her walk out at 9 p.m. She got into her car, drove it a quarter mile down to the main road, and pulled over. I followed on foot, staying in the tree line. I watched her get out, pop the hood, and with the practiced ease of someone who had done this before, she reached in and disconnected the battery terminal. She was setting the stage. She was creating her emergency. Then she sat back in the driver's seat, pulled out the signal jammer, and waited for 10 minutes before walking to the emergency call box further down the road. I didn't let her get that far.
I stepped out of the trees, the beam of my heavy-duty flashlight cutting through the rain like a blade. She screamed, dropping her keys in the mud. When the light hit her face, the color didn't just fade, it vanished. She looked like a ghost. "Need a jump, Sarah?" I asked. My voice was eerily calm, the kind of calm that comes when you've already processed the worst possible news. "Mark, what are you doing here? How did you find me?" She was hyperventilating, her eyes darting toward the lodge she'd just left. "I followed the mileage," I said, walking toward her car. I reached under the hood and snapped the battery terminal back into place with a metallic clack. It's amazing how a car just fixes itself when you stop sabotaging it. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her voice high and thin. "It just died, Mark. I was so scared. I was going to call you." "With what?" I reached into her open driver's side door and pulled the signal jammer out of the center console. I held it up in the light. "With this? Or were you going to use the second phone, the one hidden in the spare tire well?" The silence that followed was heavy, filled only with the sound of rain hitting the roof of the car. She didn't try to deny it anymore. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She just gripped the edge of the car door so hard her knuckles turned white. She looked small. For the first time in our marriage, she looked ugly to me. "Is Julian a good client, Sarah? Or is the mountain air just that much better at his place?" She collapsed then. Not physically, but her whole posture crumbled. "Mark, please. It was just a mistake. It didn't mean anything." "It meant 8 years, I said. I pulled a thick envelope out of my jacket pocket, the divorce papers I'd had a lawyer friend draft the day I found the jammer. I tossed them onto the driver's seat. It meant the house, the dog, and every morning we spent together. It meant everything I thought we were. "You can't do this," she sobbed, the rain mixing with her tears. "Not here. Not like this." "I'm not doing anything," I said, backing away toward the trees. "The car's fixed, Sarah. You can drive yourself home. But don't expect the locks to work, and don't bother coming to the house. Cooper and I are staying at a hotel. Your things will be in the garage tomorrow." I turned my back on her then. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but also the most necessary. She was calling my name, her voice echoing off the trees, pleading, bargaining, lying until the very end. I didn't look back. I walked through the dark woods, the adrenaline finally fading and leaving a cold, hard clarity in its place. The aftermath wasn't easy. There were lawyers, there were awkward conversations with friends, and there were nights when the silence in my new apartment felt deafening. But I kept the dog, I kept my dignity, and I kept the realization that I am a man who can survive a collapse. A month after the papers were signed, I drove past Blackwood Ridge one last time on my way out of the state for a new job. I didn't feel sadness. I didn't feel rage. I just looked at that stretch of road and realized that some things aren't meant to be fixed. Some things are built on a faulty foundation from the start, and the best thing you can do is let them fall so you can finally see the horizon. I'm driving toward that horizon now, and for the first time in a long time, the signal is perfectly clear.